Listen to the people. Listen to humanity. Listen to the parrot. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Listen to the people. Listen to humanity. Listen to the parrot. Parrot TV. Parrot TV.
Do you know that there is a publishing company that wants to make life easier for you as a writer? This publishing company is called World Inkers Printing and Publishing. We publish in all different languages, and we're looking for writers of all genres, all formats. We're looking for scholars, ghostwriters, playwrights, poets, short fiction, novelists, you name it. We're looking for anybody who is interested in writing and the craft of writing to be in touch with us. You can reach us at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. With World Inkers Printing and Publishing, you do not require a lot of money to publish with us. Contact us today at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. Become a winner with other authors at World Inkers Printing and Publishing. Give us a shot. We will surely finish you. Hi, welcome to World Inkers Network. I'm Dustin Pickering, your noble and honest host. Today is episode 278. Quite an anomaly of a number. And we have Carlo Parcelli with us. He is my co-host on the Foreign Policy Review, poet extraordinaire, outcast, and assembler of cantos in the Ezra Pound tradition. So let him introduce himself a little bit and further so we can get some ideas about who he is as a poet beyond the political edge that we spew on the Foreign Policy Review.
We spew. My name's Carlo Parcelli, and I've been a poet virtually all my life, and even beyond my adult life. I published 7 books, I think 6 or 7 books. I think it's 6 books. And I used to work in the canto style, and now I'm working in a monologue style, which was inspired by the monologues of the British Welsh poet David Jones. And are further inspired by, I don't know if you've heard of these people, but people like Shakespeare and Chaucer and Alexander Pope. I have my 7th book is at the publisher, and it should be out sometime within the next few months, hopefully. I'd just like to add one more thing today. I am vaccinated, and I do have the booster, and I've just learned that after I became vaccinated, my IQ has gone from 134 to 166. So I can join all the anecdotal bullshit that's out there about vaccinations now, because my IQ has gone up another 18%. Thank you very much. From being vaccinated, I'm sure it's cause and effect. I'll ask Jimmy Dore about it, but I'm sure it's cause and effect. And that's my intro.
Public service announcement from Carlo Parcelli. Thank you so much.
and I think it's going to go higher because
it raises on increase. Next booster, it goes up another 20%.
Well, if they ever start measuring IQs relatively to the general population, I'll hit the 300s. So let's move on.
Excellent.
That's and one word we did not. I wanted to tackle when we talked to Megas, and he was great. Mm-hmm. And I felt like I talked too much then. I probably talk too much now. But the one word that I wanted to come up, and I'd written it down on a separate piece of paper, was accessibility.
Yes.
And as regard poetry, and we used to have a reviewer here for the Washington Post who occasionally reviewed poetry, and his favorite poet was Czeslaw Milosz, and his key word every book he critiqued, it would be accessibility. That was his criteria. So in other words, he wanted his readers to already know what the poem was going to talk about and already be imbued with the subject matter of the poetry. That is, there'd be a sort of tacit agreement on the exegesis that could follow within that poem, so that you already knew everything that you had to know to understand the poem. And for me,
That's
well,
boring.
that was death for my work because I was introducing, even though I was introducing in my canto style, work that was fundamental. I mean, fundamental to Western epistemology, to the way you and I and everybody else in the West can understand the world, can understand the world. It had to be accessible. So if you weren't aware of the contribution that, say, Kant made or Hegel made or Adorno made or Horkheimer made or any of the other hundreds of Feyerabend, I shouldn't go on with the names, Husserl, Heidegger, if you weren't aware of the contributions they made, you couldn't understand my poetry. Now, of course, before the computer, which is when I began doing this kind of work, no one was willing to take the time to figure out what the fuck I was talking about. Even though my conclusions, after years of working this material in and out among itself, including physics, quantum theory, was that we were moving toward a secular apocalypse with global climate change. So here it is, 30 years ago, I've come up with a pattern, but no one can understand it because no one's willing to do any work that reads poetry. And nobody believes that poetry can do that kind of thing. So then comes the computer and we get Google. And I think, we're all going to get a renaissance. I'm not only going to get a renaissance, but even though Pound doesn't need a renaissance, he's already well established. He and Louis Zukofsky and Mel Tolson and Charles Olson and David Jones and all these other high modernist poets who really engaged in this epic pursuit of the way we can understand the world in our epistemology are going to get a rebirth, or at least a boost if they weren't completely dead. A boost. Because all people had to do was take Google and type in the reference. You know, you want the Malatestas, you know who the Malatestas are? Type it in. In fact, Google gives you a little paragraph now who they are. You don't have to read further. You just need to get the reference so you can move on in Canto 80. So, you know, it's there. So I thought, wow, it's going to happen. But no, it still had to be accessible so that people didn't have to get off their fat ass and do any work to understand poetry. And that's where we're at with poetry right now. And that's why I'm critical not only of the Robert Lowland, Sexton, Sylvia Plath school, which just is based on white middle class bourgeois anxiety, and also political poetry, which was the basis of our discussion with Megas. Because if the political poetry out there now is not really having any influence in changing anything, it's not. It's laughable. But so why not? Why not adopt poetry that will take you deeper into how you can know the world, how the Western epistemology is so imbued within our psyche that our limitations are such that we are now faced with not one, but two secular apocalypses. One involves the climate change, and the other is nuclear destruction. And I won't go into Ukraine right now, but when you arm Ukrainian Nazis to the hilt, it seems to me that you're playing a really cynical game, because those people are not going to be controllable. They're going to go in, and they're going to use those weapons. And I think knowing that they're Nazis in advance, like the Biden administration does, is a very, very cynical ploy. And that is part of what you can understand if you understand the epistemology dominant in the West. That's my introduction. Okay. So
excellent. So when did your shift come from the canto tradition to the monologue tradition? When did that happen, and what prompted that?
Well, we had a magazine, and the whole staff was very much aware of David Jones. We were also aware of the Pound and the Cantos, but we were aware of David Jones. And one of the people on the staff, I don't think he'll mind me mentioning his name, Brad Haas, was also a member of the David Jones Society in England, and there's a branch in the U.S. Well, here in Washington D.C., Georgetown University got a bequeathment of David Jones materials. Beautiful, just gorgeous, huge treasure trove of David Jones. He was not only a poet, but he was an engraver, and he also was a calligrapher. Brilliant guy. When you hear about the great World War I poets, even Paul Fussell, who even got the atomic bomb wrong in his books on World War I poets. For him, it's Wilfred Owen, Isaac Rosenberg, Robert Graves, and Siegfried Sassoon. And if you open up, I did it just the other day. I opened up his major book, and he only devotes like one or two comments, and I think they're footnotes, to David Jones. David Jones just dwarfs these people, the others. I have a considerable respect for Siegfried Sassoon and Wilfred Owen, but they're not in the same league that David Jones is in. But he's completely ignored. But we all knew him because we're a cut above the average people out there who read poetry. I mean, let's face it, our staff was first rate. We did it for 17 years. But anyway, because Brad was a member of the David Jones Society, we all went down to the exhibit down at Georgetown University, and we talked, and all the scholars from England for the David Jones Society came over, and we had a symposium for several days. So we watched a film on David Jones' life. There were papers delivered, everything. So we said, well, this is a natural for a magazine. We'll just simply publish the papers. So as we were receiving the papers from these scholars, freelance scholars and scholars from universities, academics, I had to sort of reflect and reread my David Jones. And one of the two poems I admired very much by David Jones were two poems from the voice of a Roman principalis, like a sergeant, who's been assigned to a foreign post in Palestine, in Judea, in Judea Perea, in the year 33 AD. Well, we all know what that year is. That's Jesus Christ. That's the year he got hung by the Romans. And so these two poems are called "The Fatigue and the Wall," and I read them, and I have a rare recording of "The Fatigue," and I said, man, I just have to try writing in this voice, because I was talking with a friend of mine. We were getting tired of working in the canto style. I'd been working in the canto style for over 30 years already, and I was looking for a new way to go. So, and it's just the style. It has nothing to do with Pound's fascism. Fuck him and fuck his fascism. But so I just sat down one day, and I said, well, let me place myself in 33 AD, and I wrote the first monologue from Severinus, who rather than the traditional centurions that were around Jesus, I made up this one, and I wrote a monologue around him, and it sounded pretty good to me. So subsequently, I went on to write 94 of these monologues, 88 of which are published in what's called My Canaanite Gospel. So I had made the transition, and I was hooked. And then I wrote an epic called Canis Ictus in Exilio, which is almost 200 pages. And it's a kind of revenge poem about a cynic, a Roman cynic philosopher of that time, being exiled to an island, and his exploits. He travels around the world, and has all these adventures. So it's kind of an adventure poem too, and it's long. And then I wrote a poem based on a lost work by Homer, and I figured, well, it's lost. I'll make it come to life, so I'll work it up again. The name of it escapes me right now, to tell you the truth, but I wrote that epic, and then subsequently, now at my publisher, I have 22 monologues. It's about 300 page. The book will be about 300 pages, because some of the monologues, one of the monologues runs 50 pages. Most of them run between, 15 to 20 pages. 400 to 700, 800 lines. So now I have 22 new monologues, and I'm currently working on another monologue. This one's based on a merchant in Ephesus, a little after the time of Christ, and it involves John of Revelation, and it's really, and this is where people miss the contemporary allegories available in works like mine, is that in that work, in the John of Revelation work, this merchant, he goes to Patmos, where John has been exiled, and John kind of keeps getting in the way, because John is a stinkweed addict. He's a datura addict. Anybody in that region of the world, datura, stinkweed, this hallucinogen, it grows everywhere. And John is obviously, if you read Revelation, the guy's on something. So what's interesting about this is my narrator, who obviously is not really much like me, is a very conservative merchant. He's a kind of Wall Street investor type, if you were to translate him into today's terms. So he sees John through that lens of like the practical world and the contradictions, and within that he sees contradictions within himself. For example, he sees that John is a follower of Jesus. Jesus has died already, so have many of the apostles, and so have many of the followers of Jesus. And what was Jesus's main thing? Peace. What's in John of Revelation? Slaughter. It's page after page of slaughter. Everybody that's not a Christian is going to be slaughtered. So this merchant, he goes, whoa, what I heard about this Jesus guy was not that. And so, what's impelling this guy to this kind of lunacy? And obviously it's the fact that he's literally made himself insane by imbibing stinkweed. And so it goes on and on. So, and I'm working on it, and I'm only about 20% through John of Revelation, and I've already got 800 lines. So God knows how long that's going to be. And that's the story.
Well, interesting. That's really a fascinating subject. I'm interested in the Revelations, tradition myself. It's fascinating, the doomsday and destruction and apocalypse, and and you're right. I mean, it's definitely, there's a contradiction in the fact that it seemed like Jesus was very much a peacekeeper and a pacifist, and get this notion and revelation that bloodshed and just horrific visions of famine and destruction. He's just going to wipe out the whole planet basically and clear room for his followers and his people, and that doesn't strike me as a very healthy attitude towards humanity.
No, no, and there's in the Revelation there's so many other contradictions and things that if you really look at them, I mean, if the man actually existed, he was one of the silliest people on the planet. So it does have a lot of humor in it. It does have a lot of, and so does actually Catechetics and Exilium, and the Canaanite Gospels have a tremendous amount of humor in them. It's like in the introduction to the Canaanite Gospel, I have something to the effect of like where pop culture gets high and high culture goes low, or something like that. So it's an attempt to make a combination of like really intelligent work not like this stand-up comedian work that we get a lot of now, but a
Mhm.
really intelligent, in-depth work, but at the same time entertaining. So
Mhm.
what I've discovered is it's true. It is entertaining. So you would think, well, now I will say that I have good friends who have picked me up at the National and International Beat Poetry Foundation, and I think it's safe to say that they admire my work and that they've supported me,
Mhm.
and I owe them a great debt. But I will say that the entertainment aspect of my work down here in DC, and I think this has something to do with the even among liberals, the very conservative nature of people down here, is that they find them too much. They
Mhm.
though occasionally what will happen is I'll go to some place. I can't really I can't get I can't be the main poet anywhere. No one will give me that. But I'll go to an open mic and I'll do one of my monologues like James Zebedee, the first James Zebedee monologue, or my standard Lazarus, which is just filled with laughs. If he's the people down the pub ask if he's resurrected, where the fuck is he? So that kind of humor, and
Mhm.
and and it, the audiences will just eat up. They love it. Most of them, I can, they eat it up. But the people sponsoring the readings are disturbed by it, and occasionally they try to shoo me off the stage. I was going to a round robin open mic in Adams Morgan here in Washington. It was in a bar of all places. And after my second visit, they wouldn't let me take the stage. Uh,
Mhm.
uh, uh, I have all kinds of experiences. When we have what are called busboys and poets here and there.
Mhm.
It's a restaurant with a venue for poets, and in the one in my neighborhood in Hyattsville, Maryland, just outside the D.C. line, we have the Howard Zinn Room, which seats about 200 people, and every Thursday night they it's it has mostly spoken word African American poets, and it's filled. It's $5 a ticket. It sells out. Now this is prior to COVID, of course. It
Mhm.
sells out, and so when it opened, I was the first person on the open mic, and I did the Lazarus thing, and uh, part of the audience was very enthusiastic, but another part of the audience was like not happy. But I learned that a jazz guitarist that was on the venue was also a deacon in his church in Baltimore. So they were Christians and they didn't like my take on the Bible, Lazarus, and that was offensive to them. But still, they got a lesson. They kind of got a schooling, and uh, and and a lot of the audience really liked it. And it's been my popular piece, my go-to piece, because I've abridged it a little bit and I've gotten it under 3 minutes, or under 3 minutes. And then I have a version under 5 minutes. So uh, it's I can I can entertain an audience, even if it's a negative entertainment. I can
Mhm.
entertain an audience with this, and I without giving up some of the intellectual capacity within the work itself and within the culture at large. I mean, there's so many things you can bring to these monologues, including a universal idiom, not only in place but in time, which I do. So it makes it somewhat difficult for people to say understand an image, but if you take a moment and you type it in, it'll tell you, well, that was a Victorian slang for a John who was out looking for prostitutes. So you can learn that it fits the rhythm of the poem, which is really important. Um, and you have some insight into a Victorian culture. I,
Mhm.
I, I just don't understand why some people can't go that far. I mean, and why most poets they don't even take their poetry beyond this notion that we all share this kind of white bourgeois angst. We don't all share it. I'm telling you, we don't all share it. I don't share it. I don't know why you're talking about this shit. You know,
share your angst.
That's sort of my sense
Spread
of
your
it.
pain.
Yeah,
Spread your pain. We'll take a brief break, but we'll be right back with you again. This is a fascinating conversation. This is really fun. So we'll take a brief break. We'll be right back. World Inkers Network. World Inkers Monthly Magazine is a fine source for your literary interests. It's an all-source magazine with poetry, prose, and essays and articles, as well as interviews. It's all full-color art and photography from a variety of voices and artists. You will find this magazine entertaining. This is an all-purpose readership, and we are looking for new voices. This sleek, full-color edition of World Inkers Monthly Magazine will be something pleasant for your eyes as well as for your mind. And we're looking for authors for one book promotion in the magazine. If you're a business, we want to promote your business. You may submit your book reviews, your academic or non-academic articles on the humanities and the arts, as well as your literary writing and creative output to publication.worldinkers@gmail.com. World Inkers Monthly Magazine does not spare any ink. Keep inking for World Inkers Monthly Magazine. Are you curious about financial literacy? Then take a look at Professor Anthony Rivecchio's new program on Parrot TV. It's called Financial Focus University. This is an excellent program to learn about questions related to your own finances post-COVID, and how you can manage your money, how you can work with your tax situation. And this is an excellent and informative discussion of financial literacy. With Professor Anthony Rivecchio, your financial problems will be solved at Parrot TV with Financial Focus University. Welcome back to World Inkers Network, and we have Carlo Parcelli with us. And if you have not, subscribe to our channel and take a look at Parrot TV as well. So, Carlo, we usually have people read a little bit of their work, but I'm thinking we can talk a little bit about your interview with World Inkers Magazine. Did you find that questions illuminating in any manner, or does anything you said in particular that you think should be highlighted in the program?
Well, I went off on a few tangents, and so it would just gave me an opportunity to air a few things out. My hatred of Walt Whitman and his poetry, because I think he was a phony, and that sort of thing. That was and your voice and your question about. I want to back up just a second, but I'll address that. I want to back up to the Canaanite Gospel and say the reason I wrote those monologues is very obvious, and that is to present the Roman Empire as an imperialist bully, and to make it and to relate it to current U.S. foreign policy.
Oh wow!
As the current bully, and that was something I wanted to get across on the Canaanite Gospel, and that's there in every monologue, every one.
Okay.
So and so it's an allegory for our times, for Christ's sake. Okay. The other thing is, my wife wants me to mention the magazine we had for 17 years by name because it's an excellent magazine. It was called Flashpoint Magazine. It's still up. All the issues are still available online. Just go to Flashpoint Magazine. We worked very hard. Very, very hard on that. The one question I liked in your interview, and it was the most of all was the simplest one. What advice do I have for someone who wants to find their own voice? And my recommendation was, I wouldn't wish finding your own voice on my worst enemy. And the reason I say that is because if you find your own voice, genuinely find your own voice, genuinely think outside the box, no one will get you. No one will understand you or pretend to understand you. No one will read you. You will be ignored. So that and anything else is a kind of faux speaking in your own voice. It's because if you've got an audience, you're not speaking in your own voice. You're speaking in somebody else's voice. It's always been it's the notion that's well established since high modernism, that the poet has to be met. Certain poets have to be met halfway to understand them, and that has actually been true of most of the great poetry through the ages. It's you wouldn't academics wouldn't be feeding their children if there wasn't something to sit down, 20 undergraduate students for Alexander Pope or Lord Byron to discuss their poetry, to discuss it at length. That's the key to it. There wouldn't be universities with lit departments. I mean, even Ted Kooser, he said in an interview he can't believe people study his poetry in college because there's nothing to study there, and that's a kind of honesty I think bears some scrutiny. But the fact of the matter is, you wouldn't have Chaucer scholars. You wouldn't have Spencer scholars. You wouldn't have Shakespeare scholars if there wasn't more to it than accessibility. What's on the surface, and that's dying. That is dying. And if you do what I do and try to reinvigorate that tradition, you're totally ignored. And by a lot of people, especially people in power, the gatekeepers, you're despised because you're doing something they can't do, and they don't want to hear about. They don't want you around. This is what I do when I criticize somebody's poetry, like I criticized Louise Gluck a few days before she got the Nobel Prize on a chat list. And all these people jumped in, and several of them said, well, why don't you send some of your own work along? The challenge. So I did. I sent them about 3,000 lines from the monologues. And I didn't get one response. I didn't get, oh, these are terrible. They stink. You don't know what you're talking about. I didn't get, oh, I'm sorry. You're great. I had no idea that people like you were ignored out there. I didn't get anything. The whole spectrum. Because they're little white bourgeois cowards. They're little twits, and that I'm so sick of dealing with. So they are, and you can get my wife over here. We could tell you 1,000 stories like that one. So I won't get too deeply into it. But I lost my train of thought because I tend to do that now that I'm an ancient human being. But
old sage.
That kind of being outside the box. It's not so much that you're outside the box, because actually, if you look at my work, I'm way inside the box. I mean, I come out of the Western Enlightenment tradition like nobody's business. The hitch is I take the Adorno Horkheimer route, and I'm a critique of it. I take the Paul Feyerabend route. I'm a critique of it. I take the Edmund Husserl route or the Martin Heidegger route, or especially the Husserl route, and I'm outside that tradition. I'm talking about its failures and its limitations. Kant talked about it. Hegel talked about it. It's all there. If you want to fucking find it, it's all there, and it can find its way in poetic form, and it can be entertaining, as my Gospels have proven. But if you're actually involved in the culture you live in and exist in and operate in, these people don't know what you're talking about. So that's on them. I think another important question we didn't get around to enough with Megas was why are most poets on the left, even if it is the faux left? Why are most poets on the left today? And what does that say about the quality of poetry? So
we should have that discussion sometime, a full
What do you think?
Range. I don't know. I think it has an appeal of being, progressive. Has an appeal to being, for one, most academics are progressive, so it has a little bit of that iconoclast kind of intellectual stamina to it, and I think that the right doesn't so much provide so much of the, the artistic critiques that the left. I mean, the left has a strong intellectual push right now, and I don't think that. I think it just has a flavor that makes it feel trendy in a way, and poets are, they fall into the, not just poets, but artists in general kind of fall into this hipster category, the hipster type of artist. Not the serious artist, the critical artist, but the hipster artist. I mean, there's just a tradition. There's like a culture of this metropolitan, cosmopolitan kind of leftism that appeals to them for some reason. And I don't even think they even think about it. Most of them, I think they just, they fall into that, and it feels like they're saying that, fuck the system, and that's what the left is doing, and the conservative has it feels like they're saying, stay with the system. We need the system. The kind of Goldwater or PG O'Rourke sort of conservatives are not really a dominant factor. You have the Charlie Kirk types and the whoever else, those guys that are saying, yeah, we love the Constitution, and, but, stick with the system and blah, blah, blah. And then you have the left that seems like it can feel critical and energetic. And, if you're just kind of fit into that tradition of artistic endeavor. That's just my guess. I don't really know. I mean, it is a strange, there's like a really strong undercurrent of feeling like it's both an outcast kind of medley to it, but also it's very trendy in a way, to be a non-critical leftist.
It's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I agree with the portion you talk about. It's politically narcissistic.
Yeah.
And what I find interesting about it is that the dichotomy between domestic policy and foreign policy really comes into play here, because your description essentially touched upon, say the beats of revolt against 50s culture, mm-hmm. and certainly being someone that was young in their early teens, right after in the early 60s. I was very much aware of all of these changes that were taking place, mm-hmm. and so it struck me as being a kind of what my wife has called a cultural transgression, whereas I always thought that I wanted to be involved in an intellectual transgression, and I don't think the cultural transgression is nearly as dangerous or is nearly as off-putting to the greater society, especially a narcissistic one, as an intellectual transgression.
Well, we're told, that being that faux individual is what we were supposed to be doing. That express yourself individual. And that means just dress fat in the whatever anti-fashion there is out there. Cut holes in your jeans and, spike your hair kind of thing that punk rockers did. And that's become fashionable, looking like a sadomasochist or a goth, that's subculture, that kind of stuff is seen as sort of a fashionable rebellion. It's a channel for angst again.
Yeah. I mean, I can kind of relate it to, we had Billy Bob on, and he's a Marxist. He's very articulate, and mm-hmm. I want to have him on again next week. Absolutely. But, on our other show, but mm-hmm. This morning he and I were kibitzing with these Venezuelans, and this one Venezuelan, or sometimes he says he's Cuban, sometimes he says he's Venezuelan, but he insisted that it was the Maduro government and the Chavez government that were stealing all the revenues from Venezuela, and I said, no, it's me stealing it. I'm stealing it. I know I'm stealing it. Along with the British, I stole all of your gold, $1.3 billion worth. Juan Guaido has stolen tens of millions of dollars, and I've gotten a little bit of take from it, although he's stolen tens of millions of dollars of American taxpayer money too. But I'm able to live in this relative luxury because I've spent my life stealing from you, because I'm an American citizen. Mm-hmm. That's what we get. we're part of the imperialist steel, and of course he had no comeback for that, so he just put the laugh emoji up. Um,
Right.
but it's true. I
Yeah.
mean, that's the conundrum. And if that is embedded in your psyche, you can't be a revolutionary. You can't be a real leftist because you're not living the leftist experience. You can't be a leftist living in Chevy Chase, Maryland, where the average house price is $7 million, or Langley, Virginia, where all the CIA people live in their in their gated mansions, where the average price is $10 million. It's all these CIA slime. It's if you can't write poetry of revolution around that, and so you could be a revolutionary to the extent that, say, my good friend Harvey Arden, who has passed, and I miss him dearly, but he made his life's work supporting Native Americans and um, visiting Leonard Peltier in prison over again and trying his hardest to get him released from prison. And every time Harvey came into my store, I felt honored to be because he had taken his largesse and he had put it on the line. And but he didn't write poetry. There's something disingenuous about taking that suffering and trying to express it when you're benefiting from that suffering. What you can do is you can do what I do. You can intellectually transgress and analyze that suffering and analyze it in poetry. It's possible to do that. There's been there's been some great poetry written around that. T.S. Eliot analyzing post World War II Europe and the world. Even Ezra Pound and his vehement criticisms after losing his great friend, the sculptor Gaudier Brezhka, in World War I. And there are great recent expressions of that kind of intellectual analysis of the problem. Just basically, Pound calls Europe a bitch gone bad in the teeth. It's like it. So that exists, but it doesn't exist now. There's a kind of self-aggrandizement. I mean, poets like Carolyn Forche, they epitomize it. She's just been made the head of the what is it? The American Poetry, whatever it is. I was looking at it this morning. But as regard the subject matter of this talk, but I've met her personally. She came into a store where I worked. She wanted to write a long poem, and she bought all of this philosophy, and there's no sign she ever read any of it. So, but she was curious about doing something like that, and then what came out was that poem about what her grandmother knew and what her grandmother cooked back in the home country, which was, I don't know where it was, Hungary or whatever, and there's not an ounce of it in it, of intellect in it. It's just so when there's no way. I know you suffer from this too. There's no way these people are going to give you a second look. Right. It's like my wife says, the resume is the poem. The resume has become the poem. If I sat down and I wrote out my resume, which would actually be considerably long, I might get somebody who was interested. When I did make the effort, I got published in a prominent Ezra Pound journal, which was like very unusual for me. So it's all basically politics. It's all this faux mea culpas, and I have to say, some people do it very effectively. Some people can pull it off, but what it means to the world, ultimately, I think is virtually nothing. So you might as well do it for yourself, because it's not going to make any impact on the world at large.
I agree. So, in conclusion of the program, would you like to have any shout outs or thank yous, or just say, something to the audience?
Oh, wow. We're over already.
Yeah,
Gosh.
we're pretty fast there.
Yeah, I want to say, I'll give one example of Oliver Stone made a movie called Natural Born Killers. And in that movie, the two protagonists, who are serial killers, Mickey and Mallory, they're trying a prison break, but they're trapped in this room. And Mallory goes up to Mickey and she says, Mickey, we'll go out in a hail of bullets. We're trapped. Let's just go out in a hail of bullets. We'll kill them all. We'll just go out in a hail of bullets. And Mickey turns to her and says, Mal, that's poetry. We'll do that when all else fails. And that, for me, is a mantra. Is a mantra for the state of poetry today. And I'm not responsible. Don't blame me.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the show. And those last words, those will be the last words. We'll put those on some tombstone somewhere.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you so much. So, excellent. Well, we've been on World Inkers Network today, and if you guys want to donate to the program, keep us critiquing and criticizing, as well as offering insight, you can donate at paypal.me/nyparrot. We do need financial support from the community out there at large to keep building this, this empire, minuscule as it is. We love you guys. If you haven't, subscribe to our channel and like, share, and love our content. Well, that's another way you can help us out. Just pass the buck a little bit to the next guy. Let him say what he wants to say about the programming. We offer interesting and encouraging insights into things. So I hope that you guys support us in those ways. And if you'd like to be a guest on the program, literarycorner@newyorkparrot.com is my email. I am Dustin Pickering. And when you can send a paragraph bio and a headshot of yourself, as well as a couple of sample works. You can be a dramatist, you can be an essayist, a short story, short fiction writer, a memoirist, a biographer. Any measure of intellectual activity you're currently invigorated with, we want to talk to you about it. And so we'd love to hear from you guys out there. If you have any suggestions of guests, get in touch with me on Facebook or through my email, literarycorner@newyorkparrot.com. Thanks again to Carlo Parcelli, and thanks to all our subscribers and viewers and those that commented today. Franco, thank you so much. And thank you to Jeff, I believe it was, Jeff Robert. Thank you so much for commenting. And you guys out there, just keep commenting, keep telling us what you think. And we love to hear all of your thoughts on the program, during the program, after the program, whenever you feel like you can say something. We would love to hear from you. So without further ado, pick up your pen, get to writing, and have a great afternoon. World Inkers Network. Watch out for World Inkers Magazine, monthly magazine coming out soon.
He tells you you could shut it down yourself.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure that out. Sorry, guys. A little bit of a blurb, a little bit of a blip in the system here. We'll get you going just real soon. Do you know that there is a publishing company that wants to make life easier for you as a writer? This publishing company is called World Inkers Printing and Publishing. We publish in all different languages, and we're looking for writers of all genres, all formats. We're looking for scholars, ghostwriters, playwrights, poets, short fiction, novelists, you name it. We're looking for anybody who is interested in writing and the craft of writing to be in touch with us. You can reach us at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. With World Inkers Printing and Publishing, publishing, you do not require a lot of money to publish with us. Contact us today at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. Become a winner with other authors at World Inkers Printing and Publishing. Give us a shot. We will surely finish you. Are you curious about financial literacy? Then take a look at Professor Anthony Rivecchio's new program on Parrot TV. It's called Financial Focus University. This is an excellent program to learn about questions related to your own finances post-COVID, if how you can manage your money, how you can work with your tax situation. And this is an excellent and informative discussion of financial literacy. With Professor Anthony Rivecchio, your financial problems will be solved at Parrot TV with Financial Focus University.
Listen to the people. Listen to humanity. Listen to the Parrot. Parrot TV.